In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. Now, this story starts off at a low, okay? It doesn't start off happy. I apologize, but that's the way this story starts off. Verse 2, the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the vessels of the house of God, and he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and he brought the vessels into the treasury of his God. Okay. You might say, wow, Daniel starts off at a low point. Why would God allow this to happen? Because look in verse 2, it says, the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand. So the Lord allowed this. Now you might say, why would God allow this to happen? Take a look at 2 Chronicles. Go back to 2 Chronicles and we have the answer. 2 Chronicles chapter 36, verse 15. It says this, the Lord, the God of their fathers, sent word to them again and again by his messengers, because he had compassion on his people and his dwelling place. But they continually mocked the messengers of God, despised his words, and scoffed at his prophets, until the wrath of the Lord arose against his people, until there was no remedy. I mean, there's the answer right there. What's going on in fuller context is God has compassion on his people and his dwelling place. And he's sending messenger after messenger to them, basically saying, turn from your ways, turn away from your sin, stop profaning my Sabbaths, stop worshiping idols, stop walking in disobedience. And what does he do? He sends messenger after messenger after messenger. What do? It says right here, they mocked the messengers, despised his words, and scoffed at his prophets. Oh, wow. I mean, it's one thing to ignore the advice of a messenger. It's another thing to take it one step further and scoff and mock and despise the words. That's an entirely different. And so there's a point at which God's forgiveness ends. And he's got to discipline his children. And that's what he does. So look at verse 17. In verse 17, it says this. It says, therefore, he brought up against them the king of the Chaldeans, who slew their young men with the sword in the house of their sanctuary, and had no compassion. See that? Before he had compassion. Now, because they've mocked, despised, he has no compassion on young man or virgin, old man or infirm. He gave them all into his hand. Verse 18, all the articles of the house of God, great and small, and the treasures of the house of the Lord, and the treasures of the king and of his officers, he brought them all to Babylon. Then they burned the house of God and broke down the wall of Jerusalem and burned all its fortified buildings with fire and destroyed all its valuable articles. Verse 20, those who had escaped from the sword, he carried away to Babylon, and they were servants to him and his sons until the time of the kingdom of Persia, to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had enjoyed its Sabbaths, all the days of its desolation it kept Sabbath, until 70 years were complete. Now, devastating in terms of what actually happened to Jerusalem, because they disobeyed God and they would not receive the words of his prophets.